Flint Anderson. If this is your first time with us today, thank you for giving us a shot. I hope that you find something of value and something that you can use going forward and a reason to share this with people you know. If you're coming back for more of the insanity that is my life, well, I hope you continue to find a reason to spend time with us. As always, make sure that you like and subscribe so you don't miss anything, including bonus episodes. And follow me on social media. The links are below. I provide daily content and unique content on all of the platforms. So today, we have a very special guest. Met this gentleman and his wife online, but through several different channels. None of them, I think, were related to each other. We just happened to run in the same circles. So I want you guys to welcome Herb Everett to us today. How you doing, Herb?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me here. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, you have quite a bio. Can you give us a brief introduction and introduce yourself to my listeners? What is it that you do and what matters to you?
My name is Herbert, and I am a psychedelic integration and preparation coach and a psychospiritual coach. And what that means is I help people get ready for psychedelic journeys and then figure out what to do after they have them. And I have an interesting way of looking at life. And so people get stuck in the reality of going to work, going to school, cleaning the house, and they forget that there is more to life than that. And I help them reconnect to that part of life, to see more than what they do, and help them and kind of help them find out who they are and what's important to them and move forward in life. And kind of how I got started is I had been in the psychospiritual world, the woo world. I called it my neighborhood of make-believe since I was a young man, but I'm also very conservative. And so my two worlds didn't mesh really well. And so I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to bring my spirituality world into the practical. And what I found was the spirituality gave meaning to the practical, and the practical helped put the spirituality into a way that I could actually use that. And just as I really started putting those two together and making it work, I started a business and I was becoming really successful. And then I started having a series of accidents snowboarding, and the last hit was a really, really bad hit, and it took my life apart. My business fell apart. I thought I was going crazy. I got really depressed. Everything got really dark. And in desperation, I started looking at what things I could do. And online, the psychedelic stuff started popping up all over the place about how one time of psychedelics can like rewire your brain and change your life and make everything better. And so I got some mushrooms and I did a heroic dose, and it didn't really help me the way I thought it would. So I did 5 grams, and it was like, well, that wasn't enough. So I stepped it up to like 17.5 grams, which is like an insane, crazy amount. Totally not recommend people do that. And I stepped into some really interesting places, and it wasn't helping me get my business back. I wasn't able to get my emotional stuff back. So I started working with other people. I did ayahuasca, I did peyote, I did several other brands and versions of it for about 3 years, kind of on my own without any sort of preparation or integration, just with the ceremonial aspect. And my life started getting worse because I started having these amazing experiences, these amazing things happen, but I wasn't getting better. It wasn't fixing me. And then I got tired of being here on this planet. I was ready to be done. And my wife was working with a gentleman named Wiz Buckley, who started the I think it's the Top Fighter Foundation, and he was an airline pilot in the Navy, and he had some traumatic brain injuries as well through all of that, and he went down to Mexico and did something called ibogaine, and it changed his life. And so my wife started looking into that a little bit, and when I got to the rock bottom, she goes, "Hey, I got you set up to go down to Mexico and do ibogaine." And the funny thing about that is when I first got into psychedelics and I started researching a little bit, ibogaine was the one I was not going to do because there have been some deaths because it does some things to your heart. But once they figured that out, they actually took, it's a medical procedure and they have nurses and stuff there with you going through that. But I was in such a state, I said, sure, I'll go. And the amazing part about that is to go to that, they actually set me up with a preparation and integration coach. And so there was 3 preparation calls before I went down to Mexico. And in those 3 calls with my coach, Cynthia, she helped me understand the 3.5 years of psychedelics and the work that I had been doing ahead of time. And I started being able to settle into what I had learned. And then when I actually went down and did the iboga, I got a reset. I got a filter cleaning. And when I came out of that, I was ready to start building my life. Now, my life was a mess, but I was ready to start putting it back together. And it's been about 2.5 years. Actually, it's been almost 3 years now since I've done that. And I'm in a much, much better place. And I wanted to help people like I was helped. Because so many people think, oh, I'll just go do psychedelics and everything will be better. But that's not for everybody. It's not a magic pill. It just shines a light on where you need to do the work, and then you need to go do the work. And that sense of being able to do the work was really difficult at first. And so having then the integration help, I became a coach so that I could actually help people get there and then start doing the work and then keeping them motivated and moving, make their lives better. Because while it is called medicine, the plant medicine, you're the medicine, I'm the medicine. And these medicines just shine, like I said, shine a light and show you what you need to do, what's messed up, and then you have to go about fixing it.
Man, that's an incredible story. That was a huge journey for you. I have a couple of questions because coming from a different perspective, I can truly respect the integration between the spirituality and the physical reality of the world. That's huge, but I didn't understand that for a long time, and I don't understand it. I don't claim to understand it in any way, form, or fashion in the way that you do. But when you were injured, you said you had a couple of injuries, and you had one that was very bad that actually altered your life and not for the better. When you were on this journey and looking for a solution, were you looking for physical healing that helped with spiritual healing, or were you, while you were healing physically, you were trying to heal spiritually so you could get your life back on track?
Yes, all of that. So the way I hurt my head, I actually have some really pretty pictures. I right before I went bankrupt and broke, I spent my last money to go and actually have some SPECT imaging done on my head at the Amen clinic. And what came back is how much damage I had actually done. So I had damaged both sides of both temporal lobes, which is where your emotional processing is. I have a really big occlusion in my prefrontal cortex, which is where your executive decision making is done. I hurt the back and underside of my brain, which is where a lot of your standard fear functions. The only part of my brain that actually works is the anterior cingulate, which is where worry and anxiety kind of reside and build up. So that part's overactive. So my anxiety and stuff became overactive, and all of the parts that calm that down were severely hampered. And so for years, like I said, I'd been working on building my spirituality and my reality together. And when I hurt myself and I lost that, I felt like I lost God. I felt like I lost touch with my spirituality. I felt like I had been abandoned. I'd been able to see God for my whole life. And now suddenly that wasn't there for me anymore. So I got really angry. Again, my emotional processing got hurt. My decision-making went away. So that's how I lost my business and went bankrupt, because my main sales guy started drinking. And I couldn't deal with that. And I wasn't able to fire him until he drank my business completely away. I wasn't able to hire new people. So it's like the stuff that I was really, really good at all just stopped. And I thought I was going insane. And like I said, it got really, really dark for me. And I'm just getting back to that. It's only been a really recent thing that I realized that God didn't change the rules. But I'd kind of challenged God. I'm like, you know what? I'm ready for a challenge. Let's step this up. Let's see if I'm ready. And don't do that in your life. Don't challenge God, because he will give you tests that will put you to the edge. And that's what happened to me. And but coming out of that, I'm now in a different place. I'm a little more settled. I think my business, even though it was becoming successful, wasn't necessarily doing it for the right reasons. And so while I was helping people and it was a win-win-win in my business, I wasn't heart-centered enough. And now with the coaching that I do, with the helping other people that I do, I'm back into humanity, into helping people live better lives for themselves. And it's not so much about me anymore.
Tell me this: once everything leveled off for you, once you were able to reconnect, you had your Mexico trip. Your brain has been obviously still healing. It may not, from what you said, it may not ever be back where it was, but you've learned to cope and deal with it. And now that you're back on your feet again, when you looked around at your life and having to rebuild and having to put everything back together, how did you deal with that feeling of just overwhelm, of just having to start over completely? Because it's never easy at any age, but having to do it after you've gone through a period of time where you've either actively been destroying it purposely or not. When you look at that landscape, it's a challenge. How did you deal with that, and where are you now as far as mentally and how you handle that?
One of the things that helped me the most, besides the coaching, is I started going onto Facebook every day and doing a live video at the end of my day. And I've done it for 630 days in a row now. And if you go back and you look at the first couple, which is almost impossible in Facebook to go back that far in someone's bio, I would be in my car and I would be doing stuff and I would be raging and I would be crying and I would be a mess and I would be like, it feels like it feels like I'm about to die. And it's like, and I look around and there's like no lions chasing me. And I would even say this in the video. And I started to notice patterns that I would feel this way and I would go up and then something would happen and I would feel this slide down. And what I started doing is recognizing those patterns and putting little pattern interrupts. It's like, oh, I feel really good now. So now I know I'm going to feel really bad for a week. Is there something that I can do to keep myself from sliding that far down? And over a year, it was about a year where I realized I wasn't raging and crying in the camera anymore. And then my messages slowly started getting more positive and they slowly started becoming more educational and helpful. And sometimes even today, it's like it feels just as bad back then because I get overwhelmed. There's still a lot of stuff that's not right. There's still a lot of work that I need to do around my house that I haven't been able to get to. There's still things that I want to do that as I try to do them, parts of me shut me down and I'm not very functional. So I'm not all the way back. I do still have a long way to go. But what I learned to do was not to beat myself up. I learned to put in little pattern interrupts so that I didn't drop as low. And so now, even though I still drop and I feel sometimes really bad about myself, and it feels just as bad as it did back then, when I look back then, it's like, oh, it's not nearly that bad. So if you can look back far enough and compare yourself to where you were to how far you've climbed up out of the muck, that is so much help. That is so very helpful. But if you get stuck in your head, it's like, oh, this is how I'm feeling. This is as bad as always. Then it can be. But then looking back and it's like, wow, look how far I've come. I'm doing okay. I know that this is not going to be that long. I know that this cycle happens. I know I go into dips and I know it's going to get better. And it slowly keeps getting better and better. Is it a quick fix? No. It's a lot of work. I've had to start over a bunch of times over the last 2 years. It wasn't just one start over. It was crash, start over again. But instead of falling all the way into the basement, maybe I only ended up at the first floor. And then I got up to the third floor and fell down to the second floor and made it up to the fifth floor. And sometimes I crash down hard, but I get back up to where I was a lot quicker now. So it is a process, it is a work, and it's worth it. It's your life. It's the lifetime journey. This will be the rest of my life that I get to keep doing this, because no matter how good I get, I know that I can take another step. There's never a done point. And if I fall down, it's like you get back up and you start pushing that rock back up the hill.
Awesome. That's a powerful testimony. You've been married through this, obviously. You mentioned your wife a couple of times, and you're a father. How has this journey overall impacted your feelings about your position in your family, about being a dad, about being a husband, just about being a man in general?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Well, I am just so very, very thankful that when my wife said for better or for worse, that she meant it. We have been together since 1989. We got together in college. Unfortunately, my youngest son, we stopped talking. There were some other issues around it. The lady that he hooked up with wasn't part of, had different family values than we did. She was more woke than we were, and I was angry. My emotional processes weren't there. There were some things said, there were some things that I regret, and my son stopped talking to me. He told me that I wasn't welcome in his life anymore. And so I haven't talked to him in about 10 years. And every time I tried, it got worse. So the best thing that I can do at this point is to give him his space, and hopefully at some point he comes back. That still causes me a lot of pain. That still causes me a lot of anguish, because most people who knew us, it's unfathomable that it went there. So we don't know what happened, even Christine and I. So even though I did get angry and some things were said, the way how far this was taken just doesn't make sense. And I don't have a way to make sense with that. And I did feel less of a man when my business fell apart, when the finances went bad. I felt like I wasn't able to contribute, and that made things even darker for me. And some of the things that I wasn't necessarily able to do made me feel worse. But a lot of that is also based on society, because my wife and I were in this together and she supported me. And now that we're building this school, now that we're doing these other things, I am able to contribute. I am able to step back up. It did take quite a few years to get back there, and it did make it harder because of these feelings of being inadequate. But again, because she loved me so much, she gave me so much space and help. Probably the lowest point that I ever faced was at one point she looked at me and I could see the disappointment in her eyes that everything was falling apart. But this was also before I got my brain scans, before I knew how badly I hurt myself, before we had proof that it wasn't just me being lazy, because I never felt lazy. I never felt like I thought I was going crazy, because the stuff that I was able to do for so long stopped working. And when that disappointment hit my heart, it's like I would do anything to change this, and I still couldn't. And thank God that I was able to grow enough out of it that I think she's now proud of me again, and the work that we're doing and that I've done to get back to where I am is, she saw me working to get back. And so even though it didn't feel good, even though, yeah, this is really emotional. Yeah, thank God for a good woman, and she's the best.
The approval and acceptance of our spouses is paramount in a healthy relationship, in my opinion. I mean, it's an emotional topic for me as well. And you shared the story about your son, and I felt that. My goodness, we have a lot of children, but one of ours is estranged right now, and I miss him terribly. Giving them their space is sometimes the hardest thing we can do as a father. And this doesn't mean we can't, just as a dad in general, anybody that's come through trauma or not, learning to give our adult children the ability to live their own lives without interference is challenging enough. When they choose to do that without any contact, it's terribly painful. I hope for your sake.
Sometimes it feels like I can't forgive him and that I don't want him back. It's like, man, I hurt so bad, I don't ever want to see you again. But then when those thoughts come at the same point, it's like, oh my gosh, this is my son. It's like, I miss him so much. It's been so long. I'm not even part of his life anymore. I don't get to see my granddaughter, and I want him back really bad. So there's that fluctuation of, it's like, wow, I hurt so much. I'm so angry. Just go away. Don't come back. But then it's like, man, my son, come back. So the prodigal son in the Bible, that story kind of rings true to me sometimes. And it's like, I hope someday that he does come back and that we are able to somehow reconcile.
That I hope so for your sake too, because that's huge. That matters. And then on the information that you gave on the initial for the podcast, you talked about this a little bit, and then you also had a question about, and this is relevant to what you and I just talked about how men in general have lost their ability to connect with one another. And in cases like this, yes, we share this with our spouses, we share this with our closest family members, but being able to have a team or a group of men around us that we trust, it can often give a different perspective. Do you believe that that's important, not only towards healing ourselves, but also in helping to solve some of these major challenges that we face on a daily basis? Maybe there could be something that could be said that could bring him back or just give him the space. But how do you feel about the importance of that group or tribe in your life, so to speak?
I've been a part of a few men's groups, and it's really difficult to get started in them. It's really difficult to get men to open up. But once they do, the men talk, the way that men can talk to each other is different. It's different than talking to your wife. The messages can go in differently. And society is kind of taken that away from us. You know, I was in Boy Scouts growing up and sitting around the campfire talking with the old man energy around the campfire with the different generations and being able to learn what it was to be a man from other men and how they talked and how they got around. When I grew up, my dad had coffee every morning with the men in town, and they sat around a stove and they just talked about being guys, and that's different. And I don't necessarily blame women for this, but they wanted to know what guys were talking about and they wanted to be a part of it. So like there started to be den mothers in the Boy Scouts, and then the women started going to the Boy Scouts. I remember when I went to the Boy Scouts, we had to run everywhere. And then when the women started complaining about safety and dirt, then it's like, well, now you have to walk. I wasn't able to run in Boy Scouts towards the end. And now there's girls in the Boy Scouts. And so that sitting around the campfire, being guys, talking about guy stuff, and that sense of community of men was even gone from there. Men's sports places was kind of taken away. So it's like men's gyms now aren't a thing anymore. So places where just men could get around and be men just stopped. And as that happened, men started becoming more separate from each other. The depression rates started going up. The feeling isolated started going up. The not knowing what to do and not knowing where to go is detrimental. And so having men's groups where guys can talk and it's not even necessarily be emotional. Sometimes it's just in one group I had a gentleman that was in the process of becoming unfaithful to his wife. And we got to talk about that, about the reasons, about all of the stuff, and give him different points of view and got him back onto a different path because he had lost sight. And so it's not just like sports and beer and stuff. You know, there's stuff that guys can say to each other in ways that are really, really important, where they can hear these things and step up and be the right kind of a man, because they're not getting that information from television, from the radio. They see all this promiscuity, all of this weird stuff. But then you get around someone who's been married happily for 30 some years and very faithfully. I love my wife. She still does it for me. And then to be able to pass on that kind of a wisdom of how to achieve that from another man is critical. It's like, it's so missing. And men feel so isolated right now because it's like, oh, we're just going to get around and talk about our feelings. It's like, no, it's more than that. So I know a couple of people who run men's groups. And to get a guy for the first there to a men's group for the first time is really difficult. But once they get there, once they feel that, then it's like, oh my God, we need this. I'm going to be here every year from now on. And so it's just this weird, how do you get it started? How do you get the guys there at least once? Because once they get there, then they feel that connection. They feel that correctness of it, and they just desire to come back.
I completely agree. I spend a lot of time on the podcast, in my personal coaching business, and just in general talking about masculinity in society today and men's issues. And in preparing for a webinar I had earlier this week on men's mental health, came across just an absolutely terrifying statistic that solidifies what you had to say. In America, every 13.7 minutes, another man commits suicide. Another man loses the battle against the isolation and the loneliness and just the feeling of helplessness.
Yeah. And I talking on that, I just saw another podcast very recently where it's not mental health issues that men are killing themselves for. The mental health only is about 45% of that. So when they actually look into men's suicide, the precursors for mental health is only about 45% of men do that. The other 55% are logically coming to the conclusion that their life is too difficult, isn't worth it. There's no end goal in mind where they have a way out. So they come to a logical conclusion to end their life because it no longer is worth it.
Their sense of purpose is gone.
That's where the men's group can help.
Men need to be around other men. What is the old phrase is iron sharpens iron. And you were exactly right. We can talk to each other in a way that the ladies just don't understand and can't. They might hear it and think we're mad at each other when we're just talking and getting along and being friends. And they might also think that we're getting along just fine inside of a group and we're really just ripping the other person a new one because they need it. And those communication skills they're inherent. They're not even, they're very instinctual in my opinion. So that's it. It's interesting to hear your story where you came from being very high and then being, because of the injury and being forced to be low and then coming back and forth, yet still holding that strength and that strong belief, even given the massive amounts that you've overcome, because it would be very easy to just give up and lay down and let life kind of roll over you.
I've actually got there a couple of times. After the first time, and I went down to because my wife put me on suicide watch and then sent me down to Mexico. But after that, it's like I would be done. I was like, oh, I'm done. And then as soon as I was done, it's like, well, now what? And it's like, well, damn, now I got to take out the garbage. And I would get back up and I would start again. So there was only one time that I really got done. But after that, every time it's like, I'm just done. I can't handle it anymore. As soon as I let that weight off of having to do more, then I could get up and do more again. And that was a really interesting realization. And that is also something that you can kind of help other people with. It's like, well, drop that, be done, let it all go. And now that weight's not there, now you have a little more energy. What can you do? What is the next step? Instead of looking at the next 50 steps, instead of looking at the next year or even in the next month, what's the next 5 minutes? What can you do in the next 10 minutes? What can you do just right now? And that is a conversation that can be had with other men very easily because they can help you look and it's like, hey, here's something you can do right now. Just go do that.
And action is important to us. I mean, by nature, men are fixers. We want to fix things. And sometimes when we can't fix the big problems, well, you know what? You fix the little problems and get your mind off of it. All of a sudden, the big problems don't seem quite as intimidating. They're still there. It's not a way of getting rid of them, but they just don't seem as intimidating. So
sometimes those little problems will take little chunks out of those big problems. And then that big problem isn't as big because this little thing you did, it's like, oh, hey, that actually makes this part easier over here.
And
too.
Realistically, that's the truth. We solve our big problems by applying a lot of little actions to them. we very rarely take one giant action that solves any major problem we've got. Occasionally it happens, but it's rare. So I have a question about and one more question about your recovery, but have you been snowboarding since, or do you have any intention of going, or are you able to go anymore?
I have. I didn't snowboard for quite a few years. There was quite a few things that happened all at once that took me away from it. But last year, a friend of mine went to Lake Tahoe, Park City, and at the last minute invited me along. And I'd heard for years about the champagne powder out there. And I went and it's like, I'm going to take it really easy. I'm just going to be on the groomers. This was my friend's first time snowboarding. And within a couple hours, the two people he were with were both like incredible snowboarders. And I ended up on the top of the mountain, snowboarding through knee-deep powder, out through the trees, just having the absolute time of my life. The next day, I ended up snowboarding by myself for a couple hours. I got lost on the mountain because I'd never been there. And do I want to do it as consistently as I was? No, I'm still a little worried about hurting my head again. But occasionally, it was such a joyful thing for me to be out snowboarding. It was a place of peace for me. Being on top of a mountain, there's a mountain energy being able to look out across the horizon. I've seen some amazing, amazing things on the mountain. So it's not just the activity of snowboarding. There was so much more spiritually involved in it, as well as just the activity. They call it the white room. One turn on the snowboard, the right turn, the right powder, the throwing it out in front of you and bursting through it, that one moment of clarity that you could get in a day where everything just lines up and you become singular in purpose. That's something that I also once in a while find in cannabis. And so it's not the whole day, it's that search for that moment when everything lines up. Surfers call it the perfect wave, where it's just like everything is just perfect in that moment. That's what would draw me back. That's what I found on that day. There was a couple of moments where just everything was just there. And so you start chasing that. And that's when things kind of got dangerous for me. But yeah, so it's not just snowboarding. It's those moments when you get that singularity.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm glad you got back out on the mountain too. Is doing things that scare us, especially things that we used to love, and having to redo them again is, in my opinion, very much a part of healing and a part of bringing ourselves back into the man who we used to be, or becoming. You never get to be the man you used to be. That's a myth, but you can become a new version of that man, or a better version of that man, as we move forward. And that's a choice. Can't choose what happened to us. We can't choose what happens to us to a certain degree, but we can choose what we do with it and how we respond to it. So if you could give one or two pieces of advice to my guys out there that are listening, that are just emotionally down, or they're healing, or they're coming back, what would be the two biggest pieces of advice you wish you had heard that would have helped with your recovery?
One of the things that helped most with my recovery, but was one of the hardest things for me to do, was meditation. And that's sitting down and listening inside. It's not, meditation isn't some fancy thing or fancy trip. It's sitting down and just being with yourself and breathing. So breathing, learning how to breathe differently changed my life. I still followed this gentleman named Jim Self in Mastering Alchemy, and I learned a different way to breathe. And that has changed more than anything. And then meditation, sitting down and being okay with yourself and learning how to sit in your angst, learning how to be coming out of your skin and still be able to sit there and just breathe. Wow, how it's so simple, but it's not easy, and it makes a world of difference in so many areas. Because if you can sit in that and just breathe and be okay, then you can make it through anything.
It's very powerful advice. Thank you. There's a trend I heard, and I don't know how big of a trend it is, but where young people are starting to talk to each other and say, you need to learn how to be bored, which is kind of the same thing. You need to learn to sit there and listen to the silence, listen to yourself without the distraction. Man, I don't know about you, but there's been times when I looked at myself either mentally or looked at myself in the mirror, and I did not like the guy staring back at me. He was not in a good place. But you can't change anything until you admit that that's the truth.
So us Gen Xers, born in 1970. Yeah, Gen Xer, born in 1970, grew up out in the middle of nowhere. There were being bored was part of life. We weren't allowed in the house, drink from the garden hose, all of that stuff. The second generation where both parents were out working and we were just left alone, and we didn't have cell phones. If you couldn't dial the rotary phone and get a hold of somebody, you were just stuck by yourself doing nothing. And so, yeah, I'm the generation that learned how to be bored.
Agreed.
And it's amazing.
Can you tell us? We're rolling through our time pretty quick. I think we could sit here and talk all day, to be honest with you. But can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, where you spend your time, and how you spend your time now that you're back getting up on top of things?
It's really interesting. The coaching aspect of it, the helping people, the sitting down, talking with people, I'm really, really good at that. Because like I said, I have a different way of looking at things. I'm empath. I'm empathic, so I can feel things and I can help get people there. But one of the things that still doesn't work so much for me is the businessy side of it. So the marketing, the getting the stuff out there. So my coaching really hasn't taken off very, very well. I'm actually starting on Tuesday to become a TriMet bus driver because I finally got to the place where I can take a job again. So for the last couple of years, where my brain was, as soon as anybody pissed me off, I'm like, fuck it, I'm out. Excuse me. Screw it, I'm out.
This has been the
And
most tame
I could
episode.
walk away from stuff.
Don't worry about it.
No. But it's like I also want to contribute. But at the same time, it's like my wife and I are starting kind of a school coaching system called Vibrant Family Education, where we are helping people educate their children at home. My wife was a 27-year teacher. We have a summit coming up on the 1st. And so we have a whole lot of things that are just starting to take off. I don't necessarily want to become a bus driver because it's going to take a lot of time and it's going to take me away from my coaching. But I also have to be a provider, be a man, and do what's necessary. So I'm becoming a bus driver. But as soon as we get more clients and I don't have to do that, I'm going to be able to focus more on my coaching, on my clients. I'm very active in the community of Being True to You, which is where I went through. And so for the last couple of years, like I said, I'm just still putting myself back together. And I'm actually really thrilled with where I'm at. The fact that I'm even considering going to work for somebody else is a miracle to me, because even 6 months ago, I would not have been able to do what I'm doing now. And I'm hoping I don't have to do it very long, because the school is much more of a passion project. The coaching is much more of a passion project, but being able to build the structure, being able to put the business stuff, the marketing around it, so that that's all I had to do, I wasn't able to do that in time. So this is an agreement I had with my wife, or because I wasn't able to get started quick enough, we do need a more steady income. It would be nice to have insurance again for a while. So I'm going to be doing this to support my family, because again, that's what a guy needs to do. Sometimes you have to do what you have to do, even if it's not necessarily what you want to do. And so in a way, there is this sense of embarrassment about that, because it's not what I had intended. But there's also the sense of pride that I'm taking care of my family and I'm taking care of my wife. So it's all of that still percolates through the cracks and the fissures and the weird stuff going on in my head. But it's a joy to be moving forward. It's a joy to be able to contribute where I haven't been for a while. And I'm also hoping to grow through it so that I can focus more on my coaching, so that I can focus more on talking and helping people and getting into the men's work, because we need more people doing that than we need more bus drivers.
I 100% agree with you. Although bus drivers are important, so let's not discount that. Also, speaking as a fellow peer, man, let go of that embarrassment or that feeling, that bad feeling about going to work to take care of your family. Dude, it is never wrong to make the choice that you have to do to take care of your family, ever. Now, if you were going to settle for that and that wasn't your goal and your dream, that's a whole different discussion. You can feel bad about that if you settle for something that's less than what you are. But that would be like feeling bad because you would grab a shovel because you need a hole in the yard and you feel bad about having to dig it. Sometimes you just got to get the work done. Doesn't really matter how you do it.
Right. And again, that's the improvement I've made. It's taken me 2 years to get here, to get to that point. And there is that feeling of settling, but there's also knowing I'm not, because I'm still doing these other things. I'm still pushing forward. I'm still making these other things work. So there's that feeling of settling that is like, oh man, it feels like I'm settling, but at the same time, I'm not. I know that, and that makes a world of difference. And that is one of those things that finally clicked, and it's starting to work.
Good. Well, we are about out of time for today. So is there any last minute nugget of wisdom that you want to leave with everybody out there?
I'm going to take this back to psychedelics because there's so many people and it's becoming a buzzword and it is really helping a lot of people. But if you're going to do that, hire a coach. Find out why. Understand what's going to happen. Like me, I did it for 3 years. Stuff got worse because it's like, oh, I'll just go do it. I don't want to tell anybody. But get help through that. And there's so many first responders and veterans who have repetitive concussive injuries, and it's really dark. And there is help for that. There is ways out of that, and psychedelics can help. But again, get a coach, learn how to prepare for it. And then once you go, get somebody to talk to about it who can help you integrate it, who can help you take what you learned and then apply it into your life so that this experience that you have doesn't become just a memory, that it becomes a pivotal point in your life that helps you grow out of whatever is going on with you.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Folks, whether you call it coaching, whether you call it consulting, whether you call it mentoring, it doesn't matter. But we can all use advice and we can all use direction from people who know more about things than what we know about them. Also, sometimes they may have the exact same knowledge, but they look at it from a different perspective, or maybe they're not emotionally involved in it. So before you discount anything that you hear, not only from us, but from any source, make sure you check it out. Make sure you see if it's actually going to be beneficial and going to make a difference in your life. I appreciate you being on here today. Thank you very much. You've been a very interesting and entertaining guest. Look forward to speaking with you guys some more. I know that I've got an appearance on y'all's podcast. Not sure the dates on when these are going to drop, but we'll definitely get those out. And folks, for those of you that are listening, if you want more information, send me a message. Does not matter on social media. You can put it in the comments here. We check all of that stuff. I am a bit delayed in getting back with you. I've done so many events in the last week or so. It is coming. But if you want more information on how to take control of your life, how to start looking for ways to become better at being a man, a husband, a father, a leader, comment Momentum, send us a message, let us know. We will be happy to get you some information out, absolutely free of charge. Not looking for a sign up or 12 different web pages to go through. I send you the information, we go from there. So thank you, as always, for joining us on Old Man Energy, and you guys have a wonderful day. Love y'all. Peace.